Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a project completion, so we'll kind of consider this one a reel in a bag project. I think earlier I may have done a diagnostic view of this reel. This is the Penn Battle II 2000. It came to me without an anti-reverse. And this one does have the instant anti-reverse override. And so what was happening is occasionally it would work and then sometimes it wouldn't. Well, I didn't get too far into the reel before I noticed we're missing the spring that's going to hold the tension on that anti-reverse override. So when you don't have that spring, that won't pull it over. This is how it should work. And if you have it set properly, it will stop the reel from spinning and work accordingly. However, I was told maybe some line got in there. I believe that what he said, he was under heavy pressure when he was fishing the reel, and somehow something broke loose, and then the rest is kind of history. So I went and ordered the replacement parts. But what I want to show you here today is how to take this reel off completely. We might as well service the whole thing while we've got it to this stage. And then we'll show you how to replace the bad part, which is the exploded anti-reverse. Put that spring back on and make this a functioning reel again, giving it a second chance. So we're halfway there. What we did do in order to do the diagnosis is we removed the rotor. To remove the rotor, we had to take off the little click ratchet and the shim washer above it, and then we took off the rotor nut. We removed the entire assembly, and now we're down to the point where we have the collar, which is holding the bearing assembly in here, holding the pinion gear in, and holding that anti-reverse structure in. Before I do that, I want to open up the bottom case. We might as well do a full service on this, so let's just consider this a work in progress. And just a couple of things. I do keep a parts tray. It's the bottom of a fast food container. And I also keep a rubber glove on my hand so that I can keep the greases and dirt and the like off of it. So I'm taking the handle off. I put that rotor back on just so I could hold the pinion gear. Normally, if I had the anti-reverse working, I could have taken that handle off without it. I took the cap off just to inspect the other side. We're going to get under there and we're going to do all of that work. But right now we can start with the removal of the case. So the case has 3 screws and a bump guard screw. Let's take that bump guard off first. And this is a good place to tell you, if you don't know the reel, if you haven't worked on it before, the first thing to do is go get a schematic. Now, I had started the project and I had to go for the schematic because I was saying what's missing, and I found that this spring right here, which is very difficult to see, it's a poorly printed one, but the spring was missing on this, and that made all the sense in the world. And then I got the exploded view, so I was able to do that, but I also see how the reel comes together, the sequence of the parts. It's a roadmap in case you get stuck. The other thing in case you get stuck is take pictures along the way. Now, I'm taking pictures here with my video camera, but you don't have to do a video. But one of the good things to do is to stop along the way at critical points and take the picture so that you know if you get stuck, you have a reference. You can go back and see the orientation of the piece and part. You can see how the reel came together. You can see the sequence that you took pieces and parts off in. So I would recommend, particularly if you don't know how the reel comes together, to go ahead and do that. And that'll help you tremendously in the event that you get stuck. I do get projects that I call reel in the bags. They are projects that people have started and, well, couldn't finish. And usually they can't finish them because there's a spring left over in my parts tray or some other issue that put the reel back together and it's not working properly. I just got to reel in. And I don't mean this in any derogatory sense. I got a reel in from somebody who said, I took this reel apart, cleaned it, followed your video, put it back together, must have done it 10 times and it's still not working properly. Well, that's where the pictures in that help. But persistence in trying was a good idea, but pictures are a better idea. So take the 3 of these off after you remove that bump guard. And that bump guard is called a bump guard because that's the most exposed part of the case. When you're fishing, it's the easiest part to bang onto a gun wall or a pure rail or something like that. And if you bump them, well, you could shatter the case. In this particular instance, the bump guard is put there to protect that case. All right, we should be able to get the bottom end of this off now. Just going to use a little razor knife as a lever. I'll just pull that piece off and we'll show you what's inside this reel. So we have a bearing on this side, a pinion gear, a main gear, and we have to remove the crosswind block and the axle shaft in order to remove the rest of that for the servicing. So you remove the tie-down screw for the axle from the crosswind block, hold the crosswind block, and pull up on the axle shaft. That axle shaft came out nice and easy, so that's an indication that it is not bent or warped in any regard. When you do that, now you can remove the main gear, and this is why you want to do the tune-up. We've got some old grease in there, so we'll make sure that that gets done as part of this. Good place to take a picture. Here's your crosswind block. Underneath your crosswind block is your crosswind gear. We have some old grease in there, probably the factory grease. So part of the idea behind servicing a reel is to make sure it's all clean, get the old grease out of there, get any dirt and contamination out of there, and get it ready to go fishing again. If you like these kinds of videos, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I'm always posting videos. I try to post daily, and this is the type of action you'll see. You'll see, for the most part, problem diagnosis. You'll get an idea of what, how the reels are made, and if you're looking to service one, if you have one of these, it's a step-by-step guide to show you how to do just that. So my idea is I can't fix all the world's reels. That was good, and I don't want to fix all the world's reels. So I would much prefer to teach you how to do it yourself and have you give your reels a second chance. So I'm inspecting this gear now. I just wiped off the old grease on the gear. I want to make sure all the teeth are fine, that they're uniform, not cracked or chipped in any regard. And then we'll take the bearing out there. I use cotton swabs and I use penetrating oil as cleaners. I don't use a penetrating oil as a lubricant. It doesn't have the right properties. I only encourage you to use fishing reel greases and oils as you do your work. All right, we got that. I'll take the one off of this side and just wipe that down. You'll notice the 2 shim washers came off of that. And you want to make sure that when you do this, that the shim washers go behind the bearing. Okay, it's sealed bearing, so you don't need to do anything with that. We put our 2 shim washers back on. We can put that bearing back on there for safekeeping. On the back side, you want to make sure that this is clean. If you notice that there's any greases in there that's left over, just use a hard bristle brush. You can use a toothbrush if you like, or in this case it's a dollar store brush. But you can do the same thing here. You want to check all of the teeth to make sure that they're uniform, that they're not chipped, cracked, or warped. And you want to do the same thing on the inside. There's some old grease hanging around inside the attachment part there, so let's get rid of that. Check the internal drive for the crosswind gear, and that's important to do that. We're going to put that back here. We're going to put the crosswind block back as well. And now we can go up top and do what this whole service was about, and then we'll show you how to bring it all back together again. I'm going to take the side plate and put that in there, and we're going to remove these 3. Now, there's always a chance that this can line up the wrong way. Make sure that you have that little angle there pointing, kind of like if you want to make this 6 o'clock, then make this 11 o'clock. On your dial. Now this is only going to go in one way, but this is how I noticed that the spring was missing. There's a hole in that trailing arm here, and there's kind of a little arrow point here, and that's a logical terminus for a spring. That one was missing. I never did find the piece for that, And I'm assuming that if line got caught in there, it's possible that it just got pulled out in the way. I'm not sure, but I do know the spring was missing, and that instant anti-reverse cannot function with that spring missing. Well, I'm going to take these 3 screws, I'm going to put them over on the side as opposed to putting them into my parts tray. One, my parts tray is getting a little busy, and secondly, these are going to go back on first, so might as well just keep them nearby, and just make sure that they're not in a place where when you go to lift the pieces and parts or move your reel case around or anything like that, that it's going to bump and somehow lose it. All right, so that attachment point is off. This whole assembly should come out now. There is a spring on the bottom here. It's an instant anti-reverse override. Make sure you don't pop that spring as you remove the rest of this. So one of the good things to do is just keep your finger on that spring as you pull this assembly out. Notice that there's keys on this. There's a carrier here that has a key. We're going to take these off in reverse order. There's a deep channel or a wider circumference, and there's a narrower one. The narrow faces up. Next then would be the bearing, and under the bearing we have our anti-reverse assembly. That anti-reverse assembly has the 2 collars to it. They're going to fit into the groove in the case. Then we have our anti-reverse bearing collar. We have the other bearing, and we have a bearing shield on the bottom of the pinion gear. So I've laid them out like that, and you want to do the same thing to this, even though your primary objective is to replace that anti-reverse bearing. You're going to do the cleanup of the pinion gear as well. There's no sense taking this whole thing apart, just plugging and replacing parts when it's only a couple of minutes more to do the whole reel and to do it right. So we're going to just pull these out. You'll notice the two cavities on each side of the case where that anti-reverse is going to go. And then we're going to just clean up that little residue that's hiding behind the pinion gear there. All right, the case is clean. Now, so we can start the reassembly. The first thing you want to do is grease up the parts. That's part of the service process. I'm going to use a fishing reel grease. I'm going to use Penn Precision Reel Grease for this. And I just brush it on. I use an artist's brush. And grab a little bit of the grease and just kind of lube it up. Make sure you get enough. Coat it evenly. And then we know the next part up was that little washer and a bearing. And then we have the new assembly. So I got my pieces and parts for Penn, as I always do, through mysticparts.com. They used to be called pennparts.com. They're an authorized Penn parts distributor. They provide great service, and more importantly, they have the parts that are genuine Penn parts that fit your reel exact. So when you find somebody that does a great job, you tend to stay with them, and that's what I do all the time with Mystic Parts. All right, here's your assembly. The collar comes with part of the assembly. You don't oil or lube the assembly. That goes on next. So this has a flat side. You need to find it. And if you didn't remember what was top, which went where, that's a good time to go back to your pictures. All right, we know this swing arm now has got to go to this side. And we also know that we're missing that spring, so it's time to go to the parts that I ordered and get the spring. Well, this one always makes me nervous. And it makes me nervous because it's a very small spring. So here's an interesting thing as I'm opening up these pieces and parts. You've got a Penn Battle we're working on. Well, there's a ring here that has the Penn Pursuit code on it. That little spring for the anti-reverse has got a Penn Saugus code on it, SG. And the point is the Penn uses a lot of the same parts in different reels. So Don't be surprised if you can't find the part in one. Just go looking for the other one. Find that parts code first, and then you should be able to do that. All right, this is a small spring. I'm going to take my protective glove off because it's one of those little things you can kind of get nervous about. It's easy enough to see how this piece got lost. It's easier to just lose it again. So I just want to set this up ahead of time. I want to be very careful as we do this. And I don't want to drop this spring. There's an open side of the spring and a closed side of the spring. The open side goes through the side hole just like that. And then we can mount the whole assembly. And just keep your eye on that spring. You do not want to lose it. Okay, we're going to bring that down just like that. And now we can bring that next part of the assembly on. We have the bearing. Again, it's sealed. We have the two-sided bearing collar. Remember, the wider side belongs low. Now we can put our collar back that's going to attach that other spring. So remember what we said, 11 o'clock. Kind of go like this, open up the holes, get your screws started, and just be careful at this point. So this is where a video also helps. If that spring goes somewhere, I can always rewind the video and try and see what direction it flew out in. But if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, or possibly a procedure or something that you're wondering about in a rebuild of a reel, if you leave that question in the comment section, I will try to answer that for you. Hopefully I will know the answer to it. If I don't, well, I'll try and point you in the right direction. And it's okay to ask, and as long as you understand, it's okay for me to say I don't know. All right, let's put that last one on. And go like that. And then my always exciting, try to get the spring attached here without losing the spring. So I've got to go for this arrow. I've got a bottom. Oh, I just pulled off the open side. And this is where I always harken back to a lesson I learned very early on in reel repair. And that lesson was that the best tool in your workbench is patience. And you need patience in a work project like this. Just trying to get the orientation right. Okay, I'm going to use a little pliers here. I'm going to just hold that set in its arm. I'm going to grab a little micro needle nose pliers here. I'm going to try and work that over the tip, just like that. So that's probably a good indication of why this thing flew, because that is not an easy spring to put on. But you can see how it pulls tension now, and if you're rolling now, you'll see I stop. And then what happens with the override, when you go to turn the override like this, it's going to release the collar and it's going to allow you to backpedal the reel. So that's backpedaling now. Flip the switch, and now I have that instant anti-reverses working. Okay, let's rebuild the reel. We've gotten rid of the bad pieces. We're going to go ahead and show you how to reassemble this reel if you have this reel. And again, this is the Battle. So what's the difference with the Battle? This is a Battle II. They're up to, I think, 3 or 4 now. Sealed bearings versus shielded bearings. So again, you don't have to oil or grease those. We have already taken care of this side. We've inspected and cleaned everything. We're going to go ahead and put some grease onto the teeth of the gear. And this is kind of where I wish I had that glove back on, but well, that's one of the issues. So we'll grease that all up. We're going to grease the shaft where it's going to go through the bearing. We're going to grease the gear that's going to drive that crosswind block. Here's your crosswind gear. We cleaned that earlier. little bit of grease on the back, grease on the teeth, and grease on the face because the crosswind block is going to ride on that stud. When you go to put the crosswind gear in, good advice to always put the stud down, facing the bottom. All right, now we would put our crosswind block in. We've already cleaned that. Make sure you get grease into that channel. That's where the stud is going to ride. And good place to tell you should have taken pictures here. This is a common problem with folks that don't pay attention. Sometimes they get the crosswind gear or block upside down. Then the reel bottoms out or doesn't turn properly, and you sit there and kind of try and figure out what you did wrong. All right, we got to go back up top now. There's a portion of the assembly here now that goes next. That's your rotor that sits on. Like that. Then we have our rotor nut. And I think this is a 12 millimeter. We're going to find out. A little 12 millimeter tool here. Yeah, that's a 12 millimeter. So make sure that's nice and tight. You can spin it at this point. Make sure that your reel is working. And in this case, we're fortunate in that we have a reel, a Penn reel, a Penn Battle reel that has that anti-reverse override. So most of Penn's current line, the Pursuit, the Fierce, the Battle, do not have that override that we're just working on here. So don't spin it with the gear in it because you may have trouble getting that out. All right. Almost made that mistake. We've cleaned off the axle shaft. A very light coating of grease goes next. That flat side is going to go through the front of the crosswind block. I'm going to match that up just like we did earlier. Having a little trouble aligning that. There we go. Hold the bottom of it as you go to push through. Align the hole so that you can get the flathead screw back in. You'll find that flathead screw in your parts tray. And then we can reassemble that. Next up, before you put any of that spool hardware on, you want to get the tie down. You could have done that before you did this axle shaft, but you can't do it after you put the spool on. Get the tie down and align that so that you can get a tie down screw in there. That's the big one. And it goes just like that. Okay, let's get the grease out of the way. And we'll go ahead and put the bottom end on then. We'll take that case. We have the 3 big screws and the 1 little bump guard screw. That's what I like about a case and a container for my parts. You don't have to go looking all over your bench for them. A lot of people like to kind of set their pieces and parts up the way they took them off. That's a good organization scheme. I do find, however, that with me, organized chaos works better. I do have a little bit of an understanding where the reel pieces go. That helps. But whatever works for you. I would only recommend to you that if you like that idea with the lining them up the way you took them off, keep them clear of where they went. All right, there's a plastic washer that goes on the screws that come out of the case. And if you're looking on your bench and you're finding them, that's where they go. It's a little seal tight. You can hardly see it, I'm sure, here, but it's on there. It's clear. And because this is triangular, it doesn't matter which direction, which sequence you use to tighten down these screws. If you have more than 3, kind of alternate, go east and west, north and south, just to keep equal pressure on that case. All right, that's the second. Here's our third. So James sent me this reel and asked me to do a service on it. I do service fishing reels by mail. And if you have a reel that needs some service, doesn't matter what the reel is, I pretty much work on everything. And you would like some repair information, please send it to the email on my business card, and I'll be happy to provide you with that service information. All right, now we have the bump guard goes on next. And the bump guard screw. And what I kind of like is, as I look into my parts tray, it tells me how many pieces are left and what's gone on with them and so on. So I'll know if I see something obvious there that should have been done earlier. Well, I know where to do that. Okay, he had this set up for a right-hand crank, so I'm going to put the cap onto this side. Next up then we have a click ratchet that goes on. And then there's this little container for the spool bearing that goes on next. And might as well put the handle on at this point. It's a screw-in handle. You will remember that because you took it off. One way to find out if it's a screw handle is do exactly what I just did there. Take the other side case off. Take that little side plate cover off, that cap that we just put back on there. And take that off. And if you find that you have a screw in there, well, chances are the handle goes through. And another way to look at it sometimes is that moving. If the cap on the other side is moving, it is definitely a through handle. All right, we're just going to look to make sure that the drag washers are okay here. We're going to take the spool. There's a little pentagonal clip on there. And then this has the HT100 drag washers in it, so you won't find a keyed washer in it. What you will find in this one is a little dirt, and that's the whole idea about cleaning the reel. You want to get that dirt out of there because dirt will adversely affect the way the drag washers perform. HT100 drag washers, you can put a light coating of grease on it. This has a light coating of grease on it already. Inspect to make sure there's no abnormal wear. Make sure that that cross hatching is all good and sharp. It is. You'll notice that there's 4 points. It almost looks like a square inside of a circle, and it corresponds with the 4 indentations in the case. So first up then, that washer goes in. Then we're going to take one of the metal washers. You want to make sure that they're not corroded or pitted or anything. These are fine. Clean them off, wipe them off. And this one is a smaller reel. It's the 2000 size, so you don't have that much drag washer stack in there. But we have 2 and 2. And you want to make sure, again, just make sure they're clean. Get rid of any greases that might impair performance. Wipe the other one off. And it's time to put that last one on. Put the clip in. The clip rides in the groove in that spool. And it's a retaining clip, so if you've lost it, you can get by without it. Just remember that as you take your drag adjuster knob off, that the washers will probably fall out. So that's what it's doing. It's just holding the washers in place. All right, I'm just checking the groove to make sure that they're all in. They are all in. And now we can put the spool back on. Put our drag adjuster knob, the last piece in the parts tray, is in. We'll give it a test. We'll make sure that it runs nice and smooth, and more importantly, we'll make sure that we have that instant anti-reverse, which was broken earlier. All right, drag washer's holding fine. Tighten it down, make sure you have full, you do. And then I like to back those washers off, just so that you don't press them in and compress them and give them an early end. All right, nice smooth operation. And stops. There you go, stops. That's what you want it to do. That's it. That's how to rebuild a Penn Battle II. In this case, we'll call it a reel in the bag project. How to replace the instant anti-reverse, how to service the bottom end of this reel, and how to get it fishing again. Last thing you might want to do, just squirt of oil in the joints of the bail arms. You do not need to remove the bail arm if the bail is tripping properly. And that's it. So, to everybody who's a first responder, thank you for all it is that you're doing. To all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Please, have a great day.